Hi everyone. Today we're going to dive into a truly shocking case. Monday, September 14, 2015, was a day that 16-year-old Ethan Carter would remember as the best day of his life. The day before, he had spent a perfect Sunday with his girlfriend, starting with a traditional morning church service with her family. This was followed by a fun gathering with friends and a romantic evening. On Monday morning, Ethan woke up feeling on top of the world. He imagined himself as a successful and confident young man, ready to take charge of life. After all, he was about to inherit Carter Construction, the family business, along with cars, property, money, and other assets. He dreamed of running the company better than his father, who had led it into financial trouble. What could possibly go wrong? But just 2 weeks later, on October 1, 2015, Ethan Carter was arrested at his high school in Riverside, California, by the county sheriff's office. He was sent to the Juvenile Detention Center in South Lake Tahoe, where he remained until June 13, 2018. That day, a jury of 7 men and 5 women found him guilty of 3 charges. It took the jury just 2 hours to decide. Ethan was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. And just like that, Ethan's plans to take over the family business ended. Neighbors and classmates described Ethan as a bright, well-mannered kid. He was always polite and focused on school, said Ryan Campbell, a student at Riverside High, in an interview. I'm shocked he was arrested. So what really happened in the Carter family? Let's uncover this disturbing case step by step. When David Carter met Sophia, he was already divorced and raising his teenage son, Ethan, from his previous marriage. Sophia, a cheerful and sociable blonde, quickly caught David's attention when she applied for a job as an office manager at his construction company. The interest was mutual, and before long, their professional relationship turned into a romantic one. It wasn't long before Sophia moved in with David. Sophia dreamed of creating a warm, loving family and worked hard to build a bond with her stepson, Ethan. Soon, the couple welcomed a baby boy, Noah. To outsiders, the Carter family seemed close-knit and happy. David's construction business brought in enough income to provide a comfortable lifestyle for the family of 4. They even bought a small vacation property in Greenwood, located in El Dorado County, California. The vacation home was a rustic cabin on 19 acres of land, with no electricity, running water, sewer, or gas. David, being a construction enthusiast, took on the project of remodeling the cabin himself. It became the family's go-to retreat, where they spent many weekends enjoying nature and relaxing together. But on the morning of September 13, 2015, everything changed. At 10 a.m., firefighters from the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, along Highway 193. By the time they arrived, the fire had consumed 10 acres of land. The cabin on the property had burned completely to the ground and was still smoldering. Initially, the firefighters assumed the fire had claimed only property and maybe an animal trapped inside. But as the flames subsided, they noticed something unusual among the ashes: charred remains. At 11 a.m., they called the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office for backup. What they believed was a straightforward wildfire incident was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. As the coroner carefully examined the remains of the burned cabin, a chilling discovery was made: a human skull and parts of a burned chest. The unmistakable, sickly sweet odor of burnt flesh lingered in the air. It became clear that the fire hadn't just destroyed property, it had claimed a life. The coroner immediately requested backup from the sheriff's office. Officers from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department arrived and began a detailed investigation. Their initial conclusion was that the small, secluded cabin wasn't anyone's primary home. It was more likely a vacation retreat used for occasional getaways. Near the cabin, officers found a Dodge truck and a trailer parked on the property. Running the license plates quickly revealed that the vehicle belonged to Carter Construction, owned by David Carter. David lived about 160 miles away in Riverside, California, approximately a 3-hour drive from the scene. This information aligned with the police's assumption that the cabin was a secondary residence, not the main home. But the big question remained: who had been inside the cabin when it burned? Was it David Carter or someone else? This lead, the owner's name and his connection to the cabin, was enough for detectives to start their investigation. Riverside police officers were tasked with visiting David Carter's home to check on him and his family. When officers arrived at the Carter family home, they found a white Ford pickup truck parked in the driveway. After knocking on the door, they were greeted by 16-year-old Ethan Carter, David's son from his first marriage. Ethan appeared surprised to see law enforcement at his doorstep and politely asked why they were there. The officers decided to tread carefully. Instead of alarming the household, they focused on gathering information. They wanted to confirm who was at home and whether the family might know anything about the incident at the cabin. It was still possible that the company vehicle had been borrowed by someone else, rather than David himself. Ethan's responses would soon raise even more questions. Ethan Carter told the officers that his father, David, had gone to their country cabin for the weekend with his wife, Sophia, and their 8-year-old son, Noah. They were expected to return home later that evening. According to Ethan, his father had left him in charge of the house while they were away. At this stage, investigators didn't have enough evidence to confirm whether the remains found in the cabin belonged to the Carter family. However, by the evening of September 13th, it was clear that at least 2 people had died in the fire. This led authorities to officially report the Carters missing. The following day, on September 14th, investigators returned to the Carter home to question Ethan in more detail and try to piece together who the fire might have claimed. This time, they were greeted by David's parents, James and Karen Carter. The elderly couple were visibly worried, explaining that they hadn't been able to reach David, Sophia, or Noah since the weekend. During their conversation, officers learned more about the cabin. David often visited the property to work on repairs himself, using portable generators to power the home since it had no electricity. The cabin also stored gas cylinders, which raised 2 possibilities for the fire. It could have been an accident caused by the gas, or it might have been deliberate. On September 15th, the fire scene had finally cooled enough for investigators to begin collecting evidence. Officers meticulously sifted through the ashes, uncovering debris from a fire pit near the cabin. What they found next would change the course of the investigation. Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office made a chilling discovery: a piece of skull with a bullet hole. At that moment, we realized we were dealing with a homicide, not an accidental fire, the sheriff later reported. The remains were immediately sent for forensic DNA testing. Among the initial findings, investigators also discovered a bullet lodged in the thigh bone of one victim. Based on the size of the skull with the bullet hole, it appeared to belong to a child. The initial theory of a fatal accident was now firmly ruled out, and the focus shifted to solving a murder. The theory of an accidental fire was ruled out, leaving investigators with a clear focus. This was a murder. It became apparent that the fire had been set deliberately to cover up the crime. But the circumstances surrounding the killings were still a mystery. Was this a burglary gone wrong? Or had someone intentionally targeted the Carter family? So, who could have done it and why? Another angle involved Carter Construction, the family business. David Carter was the president of the company, and investigators considered whether someone with a grudge against him or a business rival might have been involved. This became their first line of inquiry. At the same time, investigators delved into Sophia Carter's life to see if she had enemies or connections that might explain the crime. However, these leads ultimately didn't pan out. With no progress on either front, detectives began looking into the state of David and Sophia's marriage, and they uncovered significant issues. Over time, the couple's relationship had become strained. By the time of the murders, David and Sophia were reportedly sleeping in separate rooms. Investigators found a diary belonging to Sophia, in which she detailed instances of emotional and physical abuse from David. Interviews with friends and family painted a similar picture. Witnesses described David as controlling and short-tempered, not only with Sophia but also with their children. Sophia's mother, Linda Harper, admitted to police that she feared for her daughter's safety. "There were times I thought one of them might kill the other during an argument," Linda said. Sophia often left David temporarily, taking Noah with her to stay at her parents' house after particularly bad fights. But she always returned after a few days, and the cycle repeated. It also emerged that the couple enjoyed hunting in the area around their country cabin. Since both were known to own firearms, detectives speculated that a heated argument might have escalated, leading to one spouse shooting the other and then taking their own life. However, this theory had a major flaw. No weapon had been found near the remains. Without a firearm at the scene, the idea of a murder-suicide seemed unlikely. Investigators considered the possibility that the weapon had been destroyed in the fire, but this theory also lacked solid evidence. With these inconsistencies, the case grew even more puzzling. If one spouse had killed the other in a fit of rage, the weapon should have been found near one of the bodies. However, no firearm was discovered at the scene. Investigators speculated that the gun might have been damaged or destroyed in the fire, making it harder to identify. Over the course of 5 painstaking days, forensic experts meticulously sifted through the ashes of the burned cabin. Despite their thorough search, no weapon was recovered. As forensic evidence came in, the mystery deepened. DNA tests confirmed that the remains belonged to David Carter, his wife Sophia, and their 8-year-old son Noah. All 3 had suffered gunshot wounds before the fire was set. The angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the possibility of a murder-suicide. This revelation pointed to a chilling conclusion. A 4th person had been in the cabin, someone who shot the Carters and then started the fire to cover their tracks. With no immediate suspects, detectives turned their attention to the only surviving member of the Carter family, 16-year-old Ethan Carter. In his interview, Ethan explained that his family had driven to the cabin in an old Dodge truck. According to Ethan, his father had chosen the company vehicle instead of their personal Ford because the truck and trailer were loaded with rocks for landscaping at the cabin. This same truck had been found parked near the burned remains of the cabin. When asked why he hadn't accompanied his family on the trip, Ethan repeated what he had told officers earlier. He stayed behind to take care of the house and garden. He then volunteered an additional detail. His father had ongoing disputes with a neighbor who was growing illegal plants near their property. Ethan claimed that his father frequently argued with this neighbor, demanding he stop the operation and threatening to involve the police. The investigators took note of this information, but they weren't convinced. Ethan also spoke about his father's business, Carter Construction, mentioning that the company was struggling financially. As detectives continued questioning him, his answers raised more questions than they resolved. Ethan shared more about the struggles his father's company, Carter Construction, was facing. Business had been tough for a while, and the company was downsizing. The number of employees had dropped to just 5, and debts were mounting rapidly. According to Ethan, his father had mentioned that the financial situation was becoming unmanageable. Armed with this information, detectives started forming a clearer picture. The conflict with the neighbor over illegal crops seemed like a plausible motive, especially since violent crimes in the area were often tied to disputes over such activities. Investigators speculated that the neighbor might have murdered the family to silence David Carter's threats of going to the police. However, there was a significant challenge. No one knew which neighbor Ethan was referring to. Investigators canvassed the area, interviewing homeowners one by one. Their persistence paid off when they found a man who admitted to having a heated argument with David about growing illegal plants. But according to this neighbor, the conflict had been resolved after a sharp exchange of words. He even had an alibi for the night of the fire, leading detectives to rule him out as a suspect. With this lead turning into a dead end, investigators revisited the financial troubles plaguing the Carter family. On September 18th, they went to Carter Construction to interview the remaining employees. Ethan's claims about the company's dire state were confirmed. The business was on the verge of bankruptcy, with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, several employees had been laid off recently. This raised a new possibility. A disgruntled former employee might have sought revenge. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a community cleanup event. On September 19th, a group of local high school students was clearing debris from a business park about a mile away from Carter Construction. Among the trash, they discovered a small purse containing identification cards belonging to Sophia and David Carter. Nearby, a .22 caliber rifle was found hidden under a bush. Detectives rushed to the scene, realizing that this discovery could finally unravel the mystery. The discovery of the rifle and the Carter's documents led the sheriff's office to a new theory. Investigators suspected that the perpetrator had used the rifle to murder the Carter family, then taken their documents from the cabin and disposed of them back in Riverside. This suggested that the killer had traveled all the way to Greenwood to commit the crime before returning to dispose of the evidence. The proximity of the bag and weapon to Carter Construction supported the idea that the murderer could be a local resident, possibly one of David Carter's disgruntled former employees. Detectives sent the rifle and the bag of documents for forensic analysis and requested a warrant to search the company's records and premises. During the search, investigators caught another lucky break. They found a surveillance camera on the company's property. By sheer coincidence, the camera was not aimed at the building but at the central parking lot. This footage would soon become a key piece of evidence. Knowing that the family had left town on Friday, investigators reviewed the surveillance footage from that day. To their surprise, the video showed David Carter attaching a trailer full of rocks to a white Ford F-150, not the Dodge truck that Ethan Carter had described in his initial statements. This discrepancy suggested that Ethan had intentionally misled them. Detectives now suspected that if the white Ford had been used to tow the trailer to the cabin, someone must have driven it back and parked it in the Carter family's driveway. This realization pointed to a new twist in the case. To clarify Ethan's role, investigators re-interviewed him, taking care not to alarm him while extracting more details. Ethan retold his version of the weekend, explaining where he had been and who he had seen. This time, the detectives pressed for specifics. They asked him what movie he had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for shopping at the mall, and how he had covered the bill for dessert on his date. Without hesitation, Ethan said he had used his father's credit card. This casual response set off alarm bells for the investigators. They were closing in on the truth. After Ethan Carter's admission about using his father's credit card, investigators applied for a warrant to search the Carter home in Riverside. They also sought permission to inspect the family's vehicles and review financial records. The white Ford F-150, still parked in the driveway, was examined closely. Detectives noticed reddish soil on the tires, soil that matched the type found in Greenwood, where the cabin was located. If the Ford had been used for a trip to the cabin recently, the soil could have stuck to the tires, supporting their theory. Unfortunately, the fire at the cabin had destroyed any wheel tracks that might have confirmed this. Still, the dirt buildup on the Ford strongly suggested it had been in Greenwood not long before the fire. Next, detectives traced the Carter family's bank card transactions. They discovered that David Carter had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at a Taco Bell along the route to Greenwood. This raised questions, as Ethan had claimed he stayed home that weekend and that the credit card had been left with him. Detectives followed up by visiting the Taco Bell to check surveillance footage. As expected, they saw a white Ford F-150 pulling into the drive-thru, not the Dodge truck Ethan had initially described. The footage also revealed that there were 4 drinks ordered on the receipt, not 3. This detail matched evidence found at the fire scene for discarded drink cups. This strongly suggested that Ethan had been in the vehicle with his family on the trip. The next credit card transaction took place on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club, a bar about 30 minutes from the cabin. David's parents had mentioned this bar during their interviews, explaining that David and Sophia liked to stop there after working on the cabin. Security footage from the bar showed David and Sophia leaving late that evening. Traffic cameras along the highway helped investigators track their journey. At 2:30 a.m. on the morning of the fire, the Ford F-150 was seen heading toward the cabin. An hour later, at 3:30 a.m., the same vehicle was recorded driving in the opposite direction. The first sighting showed David and Sophia in the vehicle. The second, however, showed only Ethan. A few hours after the fire, on the morning of Sunday, September 13th, David Carter's credit card was used at 3 locations in Riverside: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. When investigators checked with the bank, they confirmed that David had only 1 credit card. This contradicted Ethan Carter's claims, as Ethan had told police the card was left with him when his family left for the weekend. By this time, forensic results had also returned. Ethan's fingerprints were found on the rifle recovered near the Carter family documents. With this evidence, investigators moved quickly. Ethan was arrested while sitting in his high school class. In custody, Ethan pleaded not guilty to the charges. He tried to shift blame, claiming that it was his father, David, who had shot the family during a fit of rage. According to Ethan, David had turned the rifle on him, but Ethan managed to wrestle the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father in the process. He claimed the fire and lies were acts of panic, insisting that he doused the house with gasoline and set it ablaze to cover up what had happened. Ethan's defense team leaned heavily on allegations of David's abusive behavior, pointing to his history of harsh treatment toward family members. They argued that Ethan's actions were driven by fear and trauma. However, the forensic evidence told a different story. The medical examiner revealed that the bullet wound on 8-year-old Noah's skull was consistent with a shot fired at a nearly 90-degree angle. This didn't align with Ethan's account. Ethan claimed that when he and Noah were woken by screams and gunfire, an intruder had entered their bedroom and shot Noah while he was still in bed. Ethan said he then fought off the attacker, who fled. Under this scenario, the shot would have been fired at a 45-degree angle, an inconsistency that cast serious doubt on his version of events. Prosecutors concluded that Ethan had shot Noah while they were alone in the house, likely before their parents returned from the bar. When David and Sophia came back later that night, Ethan shot them too. Based on the location of the bodies, investigators believed that David was killed first, followed by Sophia. After killing his family, Ethan Carter took the rifle and his parents' documents, doused their bodies with gasoline, and set the cabin on fire to cover his tracks. He then returned home, met with his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, carefully crafting an alibi. On July 13, 2018, a jury found Ethan guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During sentencing, Judge Kingsley acknowledged the verbal and physical abuse Ethan had suffered at the hands of his father. Some testimony suggested that Ethan killed his brother Noah to protect him from enduring the same trauma Ethan had faced. However, the judge also highlighted the cold, calculated nature of Ethan's actions. The judge pointed to several key facts: the premeditation involved, the deliberate act of arson, and the effort Ethan made to create alibis. Furthermore, Ethan had openly discussed his plans to take over the family business with relatives, showing a clear motive. His behavior while in custody at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center also revealed a pattern of defiance and deviance, according to staff reports. "Everyone has the opportunity to change," Judge Kingsley told Ethan. "I hope you will do everything in your power to do so. If you behave well, you may have a chance to be released on parole after 25 years under the current law. Whether or not you take that chance is entirely up to you." Ethan has consistently maintained his innocence, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. If he is ever granted parole, he will be required to pay significant compensation to the victim's relatives. The exact amount of restitution has yet to be determined. Thank you for reading this tragic story. Don't forget to subscribe for more cases from around the world, and click the bell to stay updated. See you next time and take care.